The soft hum of the air conditioning in my office provided a stark contrast to the tempest raging inside my mind. As I sat behind my desk, shuffling through case files, my thoughts drifted into an all-too-familiar storm of memories I had long buried. I am Tena, a 27-year-old lawyer. On the surface, my life appears polished, professional, a far cry from the turbulent childhood I fought to escape. The past is a locked door, one I refuse to open, even to those closest to me. The fragile serenity of my workspace was shattered by the sudden shrill of my phone. My eyes flickered to the screen. An unknown number. Yet something about it felt eerily familiar, as if the digits themselves carried a foreboding presence. A strange heaviness settled over me as I reached for the device. Hesitation gripped my hand, but curiosity won the battle. "Speaking," I answered, my voice even, laced with professionalism, but beneath it a cautious edge lingered. "Tena, it's your father." The voice on the other end trembled, uncertain and nervous, but it did nothing to soothe the rising tension coiling inside me. A sharp chill ran down my spine. It had been over a decade since I last heard that voice. A voice that once symbolized safety and warmth, but had long since become a harbinger of betrayal and pain. My grip on the phone tightened. "Why are you calling me?" My words cut through the silence with an iciness I didn't bother concealing. There was a beat of hesitation before he spoke again. "I'm in trouble, Tena. Financially. I need your help." His voice cracked slightly, the plea laced with desperation. Maybe, to someone else, it would have sounded sincere. But to me, it was nothing more than a cruel irony. An ember, reigniting the resentment I had spent years trying to extinguish. My help? Now? A bitter scoff escaped my lips, disbelief intertwining with anger. "After all these years, you suddenly need me?" "Yes, I wouldn't be asking if it wasn't serious," he insisted, his tone growing more frantic. "I'm really in a bind, Tena. Please." His desperation did nothing to move me. If anything, it fueled the fire within me. "You stopped being my father a long time ago," I stated, my voice unwavering, cold as steel. "You don't get to just pick up the phone and call me now, expecting me to help you." A suffocating silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words, with wounds that had never truly healed. When he finally spoke again, his voice was frail, almost pitiful. "Tena, please. I'm still your dad." That word, dad. It felt foreign, jarring. A title he had long since forfeited. "A dad?" I echoed, my tone sharp, unforgiving. "You gave up that title the day you chose her over me." "You're my daughter," I thought. "You thought wrong," I interrupted, cutting him off before he could attempt to rewrite history. "You made your choice years ago. And now, I've made mine." His next words were nearly drowned by his own helplessness. "Tena, I am sorry. I just need this one favor." The word sorry reverberated in the air, empty and meaningless. A hollow sound in an office that suddenly felt too small, too suffocating. Sorry doesn't change the past. Sorry doesn't undo the choices you made. My voice was firm, final. "I can't help you." And with that, I hung up. Before the age of 10, my world was a beautiful place, filled with warmth and laughter, a testament to the loving home my parents built in our small, rented house. My mother, a beacon of joy and kindness, filled our days with songs and stories, her presence the heart of our world. My father, once a man of boundless affection, would spend evenings playing games with me, teaching me the little wonders of life. Our home was a cocoon of happiness, where every day felt like an adventure, and every night was a dream wrapped in love. But that happiness was fleeting. The magic of my childhood shattered the day my mother died. The house, once alive with laughter, became an echoing shell of sorrow. Each room, each worn piece of furniture, was a painful reminder of her absence. Grief settled in like a permanent shadow, weighing down the walls, the air, and most of all, my father. Yet, to my confusion and eventual heartbreak, his grief seemed to fade far too quickly. While I struggled to breathe through the pain, he sought comfort in another. Within mere months, he brought home her, Marissa. The day he introduced her marked the end of my childhood. It was the day I realized that the father I had once adored was slipping away, becoming a stranger before my very eyes. "Tena, this is Marissa. She's going to be staying with us," my father announced one evening, his voice lacking the warmth I had always associated with him. I turned to the woman beside him, searching for any sign of motherly kindness, a flicker of warmth, but there was none. Instead, I was met with a presence that felt off. Her eyes, cold and calculating, held no affection, no familiarity. "Hello, Tena," she greeted me, her voice smooth but disturbingly void of genuine emotion. Her smile, rather than reassuring, sent an unexplainable sense of dread crawling up my spine. And from that moment on, I knew. Everything was about to change. And not for the better. There was something sinister lurking beneath the surface, an invisible but undeniable shift in the very air of the house. In the days following Marissa's arrival, everything felt different, as if the walls themselves recoiled from her presence, as if the warmth and familiarity I once cherished had been replaced by an eerie, suffocating tension. The cheerful echoes of the past, the laughter that once danced through the hallways, seemed to dissipate, leaving behind an oppressive unease that seeped into every corner. I remember observing Marissa, searching desperately for something, anything, redeeming in her presence. But every glance, every movement of hers carried an undercurrent of unspoken animosity. It became painfully clear that she was not here to mend the void left by my mother. No, she was here to rewrite the story entirely. A narrative in which I was no longer welcome. As I watched her navigate through our home, a place that had once felt like a sanctuary, dread pooled in my stomach. The way her sharp eyes flickered towards me, filled with something dark and unreadable, sent shivers down my spine. There was no warmth, no attempt at connection, only a quiet, unsettling hostility. Her arrival felt like the beginning of something ominous, an unspoken warning of the storm that was yet to come. The days that followed were akin to living in a nightmare from which I could not wake. The house, once filled with my mother's love, now felt cold and uninviting. Marissa's presence cast a long, sinister shadow over everything, turning even the most mundane daily routines into a silent battlefield. One morning, as I sat at the breakfast table, I took a bite of my food and immediately recoiled. It tasted unbearably salty. "Marissa, did you put too much salt in this?" I asked hesitantly, my voice careful. She barely spared me a glance. "Oh, did I? It must have been a mistake. Just eat it, Tena, don't be so picky," she replied, her tone dismissive, almost mocking. The incidents became more frequent, each one more deliberate than the last. I remember the day I pulled my clothes from the laundry, only to find them ruined, faded, stretched, completely unwearable. "Marissa, my clothes are all ruined. What happened?" I confronted her, holding up my once favorite dress, now discolored and lifeless. She barely feigned interest, shrugging nonchalantly. "Maybe the washing machine is acting up. Or maybe," she added with a smirk, "it's time you stopped wearing such childish clothes." Frustration flared within me, but I knew that arguing would only make things worse. Feeling utterly helpless, I turned to my father, my last hope. "Dad, Marissa is ruining my things. She's always mean to me," I pleaded one evening, my voice trembling, a mixture of anger and sadness bubbling to the surface. But my father's reaction was not the one I had desperately hoped for. "Tena, you're imagining things. Marissa is doing her best to fit into our family. Stop causing trouble," he said sternly, his words cutting through me like a blade. "But Dad, it's the truth," I protested, my heart hammering in my chest. His patience snapped. "That's enough, Tena. I don't want to hear any more of your accusations," he barked, his voice rising in anger. Each day became a battle, one where I had to carefully navigate around Marissa's hostility and my father's blind indifference. The home that had once been my refuge now felt like a prison. More and more, I found myself retreating to my room, seeking solace in the only space that still felt remotely safe. Living in that house was a constant ordeal, a daily exercise in endurance. I felt alone, unheard, misunderstood. The warmth and joy that once filled our home had been replaced by an ever-present anxiety, an underlying fear that never left me. I longed for the past, for the days when my mother's smile could brighten even the darkest of times. But those days were gone, replaced by a suffocating darkness that clung to every inch of the house. As the weeks went by, Marissa's cruelty escalated. What began as subtle jabs and belittling remarks soon evolved into something far more sinister. The first time she hurt me physically, it was almost imperceptible. A sharp pinch on my arm, a twist of my wrist, always in places easily concealed under my clothing. The pain was real, a cruel reminder of my helplessness in her presence. I learned to be cautious, to anticipate her movements, to avoid crossing paths with her whenever possible. I would linger in hallways until she passed, take longer routes to my room, hold my breath as I listened for her footsteps. But no matter how careful I was, there were times when she would catch me off guard, and those moments always ended in pain. One evening, as I sat quietly reading in the living room, she walked in. Without warning, she pinched my arm, her nails digging into my skin with sharp cruelty. I winced, biting back any cry of protest. She merely smirked, triumphant, before walking away. During one of Grandma's rare visits, she noticed the way I moved, cautious, hesitant. She saw the way I flinched whenever Marissa's voice echoed through the house. "Tena, is everything all right at home?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. I looked at her, my heart aching to tell her the truth, to finally let someone see the horror I was living through. But fear held me back. Fear of my father's reaction, fear of making things worse, fear of being dismissed yet again. "So?" I forced a smile, pushing down the lump in my throat. "Yes, Grandma, everything's fine, just a lot of schoolwork," I lied, offering her a reassurance I didn't believe in. And just like that, the moment passed. My chance to be heard slipped away, swallowed by the silence that had become my constant companion. A forced smile crossed Grandma's face. She seemed unsure, hesitant, but chose not to press further. I felt a pang of guilt for deceiving her, for hiding the painful truth, but I couldn't bear the thought of causing her distress. She had always been my source of warmth and comfort, and the last thing I wanted was to burden her with my suffering. That evening, as she bid us farewell, I caught sight of Marissa watching from the window, her lips curled in satisfaction. It was as if she relished the power she held over me, the knowledge that she could inflict pain and get away with it. Her triumphant expression sent a clear message. She was in control, and I was nothing more than a helpless pawn in her twisted game. I retreated to my room, feeling trapped in an endless cycle of abuse and silence. The physical pain from Marissa's pinches and twists was nothing compared to the emotional torment I endured daily. School became my only refuge, a place where, for a few precious hours, I could escape the misery that awaited me at home. But even there, the weight of my secret began to seep through the cracks of my carefully constructed facade. Mrs. Thompson, my teacher, was a kind-hearted woman who always encouraged her students to reach their full potential. She had started noticing the changes in me, the way my shoulders slumped, the tired shadows beneath my eyes, the flinches I couldn't always hide. One day, as I handed in my homework, she gently took my wrist, her eyes narrowing at the faint bruises marring my skin. "Tena, what happened here?" "These look like bruises," she said, her voice filled with concern. Panic surged through me. I quickly pulled my arm back, tugging my sleeve down to cover the marks. "It's nothing, Mrs. Thompson. I fell while playing," I lied, avoiding her gaze. She didn't look convinced. Her warm brown eyes searched mine, silently urging me to tell the truth. "Tena, if something is wrong, if someone is hurting you, you can tell me. It's important to speak out," she said gently. For a moment, I wanted to confide in her. I wanted to tell her everything. About Marissa, about the fear that gripped me every day, about the bruises hidden beneath my clothes. But the words wouldn't come. The fear of what Marissa might do if she found out held me back, paralyzing me. Instead, I forced a smile. "Really, Mrs. Thompson, I'm fine. It was just a silly accident." She studied me for a long moment before nodding slowly. "All right, Tena. But remember, my door is always open. You're not alone." Her reassurance sent a lump rising in my throat. As I walked home that day, her words echoed in my mind, bringing a mix of gratitude and a deep aching loneliness. Someone cared. Someone had noticed. But was that enough? The thought of revealing the truth was terrifying. I feared the consequences, feared what Marissa would do if she found out I had spoken. That night at dinner, I was quieter than usual, my mind consumed by Mrs. Thompson's words. Marissa, always attuned to my every movement, noticed immediately. "Why so quiet tonight, Tena? Cat got your tongue?" she asked, her tone dripping with mockery. I shook my head and kept eating, willing myself to become invisible, to not provoke her. After dinner, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the weight of my reality settled over me like a suffocating blanket. Mrs. Thompson's concern had reminded me that there were people who cared, but fear still held me captive. I was caught between two forces: the desperate need to tell someone and the paralyzing terror of Marissa's retaliation. Every day was a delicate balancing act, one I wasn't sure I could maintain for much longer. The day my teacher decided to involve my father was one of the most terrifying of my life. I sat in the principal's office, my hands twisting in my lap, my heart pounding, anxiety coiled tightly in my chest, my mind racing with the potential fallout of what was about to unfold. When my father finally arrived, his expression was grim, his posture rigid. His eyes flickered with a mix of irritation and embarrassment. "What is this about, Tena? Why am I being called to your school like this?" he demanded, his voice sharp as he stepped into the office. I glanced at Mrs. Thompson, seeking some form of reassurance. Swallowing hard, I tried to summon the courage to speak. "Dad, Mrs. Thompson She saw the bruises," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. Before I could say another word, his expression darkened, his jaw tightened, his anger palpable. "Bruises? What are you talking about? Are you making up stories again?" he snapped, his disappointment evident. Mrs. Thompson intervened, her tone firm yet calm. "Mr. Smith, I'm deeply concerned about Tena's well-being. The bruises on her arm don't appear accidental. We need to address this." His face flushed with anger, his hands clenching into fists. "She's perfectly safe at home. Tena, are you spreading lies about our family?" he accused, his eyes locking onto mine, filled with disbelief and frustration. Tears welled in my eyes, spilling down my cheeks before I could stop them. "It's not a lie, Dad. Marissa, she's been hurting me," I finally blurted out, the truth ripping from my lips, raw and desperate. His reaction was one of total shock. Disbelief filled my father's face as he shook his head. "Marissa? That's ridiculous. She's been nothing but kind to you. I won't have you slandering her with these baseless accusations." "But Dad, it's the truth," I cried out, my voice breaking as I desperately pleaded for him to believe me. His patience, already worn thin, finally snapped. He stood up abruptly, his eyes flashing with irritation. "Enough of this. Tell Mrs. Thompson you made it all up." Tears burned in my eyes as I obediently turned to my teacher, my heart sinking as I repeated his words. She nodded, her expression unreadable, and said nothing more. The weight of my father's disappointment crushed me. The last sliver of hope I had clung to faded in an instant. When we arrived home, my father said nothing. He simply led me to my room, and without another word, he locked me inside. I stood frozen, my breath shallow as I heard the faint sound of Marissa's voice through the door, dripping with false concern. "I told you, John, she's just seeking attention." I sank onto my bed, the overwhelming sense of isolation pressing down on me. The one person I thought would always stand by my side had turned his back on me. My room, once a safe haven, now felt like a prison. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating me with the unbearable weight of betrayal. The physical pain Marissa inflicted was nothing compared to the emotional torment of being disbelieved and punished by my own father. It was a harsh and devastating realization. The person who was supposed to protect and love me unconditionally had become the source of my deepest pain. The days that followed were some of the darkest I had ever experienced. Confined to my room, isolated from the world, I felt utterly alone. But in that loneliness, a single thought kept resurfacing: my grandmother. My father's mother had always been kind to me, showing me the love and affection that had long since vanished from my own home. She had always been my safe place, even if I had never dared to burden her with the reality of my life. One evening, when I was certain that my father and Marissa were too occupied to notice, I mustered the courage to act. My hands trembled as I reached for the phone, my heart pounding as I dialed her number. "Hello?" Her familiar warm voice filled my ears, a comfort I hadn't realized I needed so badly. "Grandma, it's me, Tena," I whispered, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Tena, my dear, how are you?" she asked, her tone brimming with concern. Tears welled up in my eyes as I finally let the words escape. "Grandma, I need help. Can I come stay with you for a while?" There was a pause on the other end, a silence filled with unspoken understanding. Then, her voice came through, firm and unwavering. "Of course, my dear. You come right over. I'll take care of this." The next day, my grandmother arrived. Though small in stature, she carried herself with a strength that commanded the room. She wasted no time confronting my father. "John, I'm taking Tena with me. She's not safe here," she declared, her voice unwavering. My father, caught off guard, attempted to protest. "Mom, you can't just take her. She's my daughter." Grandma's eyes burned with steely determination. "Your daughter? The one you failed to protect? I won't stand by and watch her suffer." Marissa, always ready to defend herself, sneered. "She's just a child making up stories. You can't seriously believe her over us." My grandmother turned to her, her gaze piercing. "I know a scared child when I see one. Tena is coming with me, and if you try to stop me, I'll take this matter to the authorities." My father, realizing he was defeated, didn't fight back. He simply stood there, silent, as I gathered my belongings. For the first time in months, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I turned one last time to see Marissa's expression shift, from defiant to defeated. Leaving that house with my grandmother, I finally felt safe. The car ride to her home was quiet, but her presence beside me was all the comfort I needed. When we arrived, she turned to me and placed a gentle hand on mine. "You're safe now, Tena. You don't have to worry anymore." In my grandmother's house, I found something I had lost long ago: love, security, and a chance to heal. The contrast between her nurturing warmth and the coldness of my father's house was stark. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe again. Years passed, and I grew into the woman my grandmother had always believed I could be. But time, as it always does, brought changes. My beloved grandmother passed away, leaving a void that felt impossible to fill. At her funeral, my father and Marissa showed up, their faces carefully composed with feigned sorrow. But I could see the eagerness lurking beneath their expressions. It was clear they were more interested in what they could gain from her passing than in mourning her loss. After the service, as we gathered at my grandmother's home, Marissa wasted no time. "Well, Tena," she said, her voice tinged with barely concealed glee, "I suppose you'll be finding a new place to live now. This house and everything in it belongs to your father now." My father nodded in agreement, his eyes already scanning the room, as if mentally dividing up my grandmother's belongings. I couldn't help but smile, a reaction that seemed to confuse them. "Actually, that's where you're wrong," I said, my voice steady, confident. My father's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. "Grandma left a will. She bequeathed this house and a substantial amount of money to me." Their faces shifted from confusion to shock. But you're just a child. I'm your father. I should be in charge of any inheritance you receive," my father stammered, his entitlement shining through. Marissa, her voice shrill, interjected. "Yes, until you come of age, your father will manage your property." I met their stunned expressions with unwavering resolve. "You don't care about me, not enough to even wish me a happy birthday?" I echoed, my voice laced with disbelief. "I turned 18 a month ago. I'm legally an adult now. I make my own decisions." I watched as the realization dawned on their faces. My father's expression shifted from shock to anger and then, surprisingly, to something resembling desperation. "Tena, you can't do this. We're your family," he pleaded, his tone lacking the authority it once held over me. I looked at them both, my mind flooded with memories. The years of neglect, the loneliness, the pain that had defined my childhood. I took a deep breath, my resolve unwavering. "You stopped being my family a long time ago," I said, my voice steady and firm. Marissa stepped forward then, her demeanor shifting from haughty superiority to pitiful desperation. "At least let us stay in the house," she begged. "We have nowhere else to go. We didn't extend the lease on our place." I shook my head, unyielding. "This is my house now. You'll need to find somewhere else." As they gathered their things and walked out the door, I felt something lift from my shoulders. A weight that had burdened me for far too long. Standing in the house that was now truly mine, I inhaled deeply, the air feeling lighter, freer. This place, once tainted by pain, was also filled with the warmth of my grandmother's love, and that was the part I chose to hold on to. Yet, even as I relished my newfound freedom, the echoes of the past lingered. My phone sat in my hand, my father's missed call flashing on the screen. A storm of emotion swirled within me, anger, betrayal, a deep-seated sense of injustice. But amidst it all, there was something else. Strength. I had endured, I had survived, and now I was free. Looking back on everything I've endured, I have come to understand that life often tests us in unimaginable ways. The wounds of my past, both physical and emotional, have shaped me into the person I am today. I have learned that resilience is not just about surviving, but about rising above the pain, refusing to be defined by the cruelty of others. If there is one lesson I want to impart, it is this: never let anyone make you feel powerless. People may try to manipulate you, to break you, to convince you that you are unworthy of love and respect. But remember, your worth is not determined by how others treat you. You have the strength within you to stand up, to fight back, and to reclaim your life. For years, I felt trapped, convinced that no one would ever believe me, that I had no escape. But even in my darkest moments, there was a flicker of hope, a whisper of strength reminding me that I deserved better. And you do too. No matter how impossible your circumstances may seem, there is always a way forward. Find the people who truly care about you, who will stand by you even when others turn away. Trust in yourself, in your voice, in your right to a life free from fear and pain. I was once a child longing for love and protection, only to be met with betrayal and indifference. But today, I stand as a woman who has overcome, who has healed, who has reclaimed her story. So, to those who are struggling, who feel unheard and unseen, hold on. The darkness may feel endless, but light is waiting for you on the other side. Choose yourself, fight for your happiness, and never forget that you are stronger than you know.